Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. And today, we'll be talking with Nate Martin, the CEO of PuzzleBreak, about how they make good decisions on remote work, hybrid work during the pandemic, as well as how they support others in their pursuit of team building in hybrid and remote contexts. So let's start with your company, what you did. What did you learn, Nate, from the transition during the pandemic to hybrid work, remote work? What was the most important thing that you learned during this time?
Man, that is a very big question right off the bat. We learned a lot of lessons, both for ourselves and for the people that we serve. Maybe the biggest single takeaway that we eventually got, and it took a minute, is that remote work just works in a way that I don't think anyone really expected. We all suspected. But what we found, both for us at PuzzleBreak and for all of the folks that we help, remote work is working for a lot of people. Not everyone everywhere, but a lot more than kind of we thought it would.
Excellent. And tell me a little bit more about how you got to the point of helping others with team building and remote work, and generally how you built PuzzleBreak. What's your story? What's your journey?
Right. So as you say, I'm the founder and co-founder and CEO of PuzzleBreak, which is actually the first American escape room company. And for those of you who do not know, increasingly most people know, but escape rooms, you are usually in an enclosed space with your team, and you have to work together to find clues, solve puzzles, overcome an objective using your brains and teamwork to escape the room. So we brought that to America in 2013. And almost immediately, we saw a great deal of unexpected traction for team building and B2B audiences. We made it something fun. I come from video games, I come from software. It's like, this would be a fun thing to do with your friends, but it is a really, really powerful team building tool to kind of force people to work as a team on something fun. And that's balanced in a number of different ways. So then we develop more kind of B2B content, more team building stuff. We develop portable team building solutions. We'd go to meetings and offsites and all this. Then the pandemic happens.
Yeah.
And that hit us and everyone on our field, both escape rooms and in-person team building, devastatingly hard, as you might imagine. But because we design experiences kind of is our business, we very quickly made a pivot to virtual. And so we rolled out, the global lockdowns really started to happen in March of 2020. In April, just 1 month later, we rolled out our first virtual team building experience for remote audiences. At that time in lockdown, we still do this a great deal to this day, using the general principles that we had found kind of delivering this with in-person kind of puzzle challenge escape room experiences. It was a huge hit. Everyone in the world needed it. And here we are today. And it's been a wild ride.
Excellent. So tell me, if I was inside your remote experience, what would it look like?
Well, there's a ton of different stories and shapes and sizes, but at its core, whether you're in a room that has, a ton of kind of hidden electronics that feels like a Victorian manor or a futuristic office or everything in the middle, the core general principles is that you don't know what you have to do. You have to figure out what you need to figure out, and you can't do it by yourself. And so there's like patterns that you need to find in the form of whatever appropriate clues. And when I say solve puzzles, I don't mean, doing an analog jigsaw in the corner. It can range from, something very, very small all the way to everyone needs to touch these glyphs on the wall at the same time. And this grand reveal happens. But for everything that we do offline and online, they are engineered in a way to kind of trick people into team building while having a great time.
How would that work in remote? So give me some examples of specific puzzles that people would solve in remote settings that would be fun and that were fun and are fun and engaging for remote teams.
So this was, you asked like, what was your biggest lesson for
Yes.
the remote work? And this was maybe kind of in second place, was in a little bit of nuanced design principles. So we had been doing what we're talking about for a decade, and we're very good at it. I could design for you an in-person kind of escape room style team building experience trivially. When it came time to try something virtual, we kind of assumed that we would be very good at it right off the bat. And it turns out that there's actually a lot of things that don't quite translate. And then there's a lot of things that the design space is actually a lot more open in other areas in a virtual environment. So I'll add that virtual team building is not monolithic. There's a lot of different ways to do what I'm about to describe. But for us personally, because we like it to be as accessible as possible, you might have one of our experiences take place in a museum. And so you have different rooms in the museum, and there's actually different clues to various puzzles in different rooms. So you might be in this wing of the museum and you have to look under this artifact, which has half of a clue. Meanwhile, I'm in this other room and I have to look at the ceiling, and then there's this clue. And we have to talk about what we found, what it looks like, and we cannot look at them at the same time. So we have to talk it out. Largely web-based. We're working on some more nuance there, but that's at its core the exact same thing. Not only that we were doing kind of for in-person team building and back to 2013, but really what kind of team building workshops have been in one form or another going back to the 50s and 60s when we were first starting to crack this nut.
And so you talked about the museum as a specific example. So people would be in different wings of the museum and they would visually see different things in the museum, and then they would need to talk to each other. That's kind of one example, right? And how did people experience it? So you launched it in April. What was the first thing you did, and what did you learn over time that you need to do differently?
Well, it's a very good question. There's an element of, we were talking about it already, kind of open communication. Now, I'll add that not every team building exercise needs to have this exact flavor of kind of communication. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But what we found in our initial design, the very first one that we did, I should say the very first version of the very first one we did, we fixed this rapidly. We would encounter groups of silent people hunched over their desks writing, and just then going, and in this museum example, this is not the exact game we were doing, they would write down what they saw in museum room number 1, and then quietly, without saying anything out loud, and then they would go into the other museum room and write it down and kind of quietly solve it. And so we had 6 people working on a fun game independently of one another, which defeats the whole purpose.
Of course.
And so there was a lot of kind of restrictions that we had to impose, which naturally exist in a physical space that people can defeat if they are in a virtual space. So we had to really build some serious barriers to force people to collaborate.
I like that. So you had to actually get people to collaborate, because one of the things that I see when I do team building exercises is that there's this awkwardness. I think there is more awkwardness in the remote space than there is an in-person space. In-person, people can read each other's body language. They can engage with each other. It feels more connecting. So when we look at why people are more connected in in-person spaces, we are wired to be tribal. Kind of that's our evolutionary psychology background, and our intuitions.
This applies, frankly, even if we know each other, like we're best friends and we're doing this and we just want to beat the clock, it'd be very easy to just be quiet and not engage with each other, let alone if it's a group of 5 people on 5 different teams and we have never been introduced until the beginning of this game. Yeah, it's a very natural thing to try and avoid.
Yeah, because it feels harder online in a way that it wouldn't in person. We're wired to engage with each other in person in a way that we're not online. So you have to overcome more of an initial initiation barrier to get people engaged with each other, to see the value of them engaging with each other. So that's what
and deliver rewards. This is something that I, because we're at its core, we're gamified experience. We can interject little endorphin hits whenever teamwork is experienced or delivered in ways that's super duper fun.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about that. How do you deliver
It's
those
not super
fixes?
complicated. Just, the ding of a noise. If you have to, like, there's either a physical crate in a room or a digital door you have to open. Whenever you open it, you just add a little fanfare, a little delay, a little, like we did it, some confetti on the screen. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, but whenever you see that, and like you and I, we made that happen, it feels really good, and we want to do it again.
Excellent. So what has been the consequence for people of participating in the virtual puzzle room experience?
Well, it's a lot of different things. I would say, to kind of a little bit of history, at the beginning of, I should say middle of 2020 into the end of 2020, the global workforce, and I'm painting with a very broad brush, this is not everyone, of course, but we were just trying to get our legs underneath us. It was a scary time where we just don't know what's going on. We're disconnected, not just from our coworkers, but from the world. So it's such a, like, at that beginning, when we're delivering these virtual team building experiences, we were so excited about, like, oh, we got these measurable, quantifiable analytics and performance development and stuff, and nobody cared. They just wanted, I just need to keep my team together. I want to make sure that everyone's sane and having a nice time and they feel invested in. Then over time, through today and continuing, like, we're not in, meaningfully in most of the world, any kind of serious lockdown situation. We just have employers that are increasingly going remote for a myriad of reasons. Yeah. And we have teams that are, some hybrid, some they're even mostly in person, and we do virtual for in-person team. That's just an easy thing to do at your desk. And then we get a little bit into more of like the measurable, quantifiable stuff. And we approach this in a couple of different ways. We don't have anything super duper peer reviewed that rises to the level of, I'm going to swear to this in front of a bunch of professors. But we do things like we just do a pregame discussion about anticipated performance, and we see things like, to get to your actual question, people have very unexpected outcomes a lot of the time. We have people routinely that think that they're going to be great as a team and as individuals, and they're not. And then we have folks that have no confidence in themselves and their teams, and they really feel bad at the beginning experience, and they absolutely kill it. And we focus on why their expectations were met or were not met. But I'd say one of the biggest takeaways that we see is how folks really don't know how they're going to do.
Interesting. Okay. And what kind of predictors have you figured out for why teams will work out well versus not?
This is a great question. And I would say, honestly, I touched on this a moment ago, confidence or overconfidence is a big killer. This is true of life. If you just go and think of, like, I'm going to be great at this thing, and then you hit the first wall, we typically, in those situations, no matter who you are, no matter what your background is, if you hit a wall with a lot of overconfidence, it's a lot harder to kind of take a step back and struggle. People without a lot of confidence, they don't have high expectations of their performance, but then come with the kind of ability to kind of step back and keep calm and analyze why anything isn't going particularly well and how we have to overcome it. People with that attitude, they'll overperform every time. A gross generalization, let me get in front of this before I get flamed online. Some of the people that struggle with kind of our type of experience the most, which is to say, a team challenge that puts people in an unfamiliar setting with challenges that they maybe have to figure out, are doctors and lawyers. Doctors and lawyers are used to being, often, not all doctors, not all lawyers, of course, you're the top dog in the room. You have more educated surgeons, famously, are just, like, I'm not going to need a bunch of help. There's nothing I don't know. And if there's something I don't know, I'm going to be able to figure it out. And often the top lawyers in the world and the top doctors in the world don't often work collaboratively in teams. So when they hit a wall and something they're unfamiliar with and have to rely on others to kind of help them dig out of the hole, they are often not super equipped to deal with that. And it's very funny to watch, very senior doctors or very senior lawyers with their very junior level interns or whomever just drag them across the finish line. Like, don't worry, Mr. CEO, I got this. buckle up, and then the interns get them to victory.
That's excellent. I really like that.
Yeah.
And that's something really important for people to learn, right? That's a good lesson about humility.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel good in the moment, I will add. Part of what we do is we like to deliver a lot of fun, but to your point, to be really efficacious, sometimes it has to be a little bit unfun.
Yeah. I wonder if another aspect, so I'm thinking about the work of James Sarowicki on wisdom of the crowds and kind of talking about peer-reviewed research. So that shows that people in teams that are diverse thinkers, so having different types of mentalities and different skills, tend to overall, in decision-making at least, outperform teams that have similar skills and similar mentalities and similar frameworks. Now, teams with similar skills, mentalities, and frameworks tend to make quicker decisions, but the decisions are quite a bit worse. And diverse people tend to make slower decisions, but the decisions tend to be better. And I'm curious if you've noticed that, or if that's not something you've noticed.
So I will say absolutely, but we are kind of cheating. And the reason is we design all of our content. It's very surgically crafted for this exact reason. I need folks of different experience levels and walks of life to really all get something from the experience. And so all of our content, even within one experience, is pretty varied. You're not going to have like, oh, this game is for math lovers, or this game is for language puzzle lovers. We have a variety of content, if for no other reason than, frankly, ultimately we are a for-profit business and I want people to have a good time. But as a direct side effect of that, I'm cooking up a lot of different content. And when you have everyone is very uniform, they all have the same educational background, they all have the same role, they all have the same kind of thinking style. They are absolutely going to do super well on that one or two pieces of content that is exactly tailored to them. And to your point, they'll make the decision very quickly. But indeed, when they hit everything else, they will get beaten 10 times out of 10 by the diverse thinkers. The exception here is, I guess, when people are self-aware. We do see a lot of, I just got done throwing a fair amount of shade at senior doctors and senior lawyers. There are many, many people who are super senior in their field who recognize their own weakness. And so even if it is a little bit, they're not the most diverse group. If they recognize that they're not the most diverse group and really go out of their way to listen to the folks in their group that don't look or think like them, they're going to, in our general experience, do just as well as a super varied team, as long as they have that awareness.
That awareness is pretty difficult to get.
You're not wrong. It's part of, I don't know if we would exist or be successful if everyone was good at that naturally, for sure.
Sure. And that's something that you help folks develop. Now, when people come to your puzzles a second time around, so I assume you have many repeat customers. So when they come a second time around, how's their experience different in this virtual example? So let's focus on the virtual.
And that's fair. And I'll say it's actually fairly consistent, both virtual, portable, hybrid, everything that we do. There are shades of similarities in the second time they come. In many ways, what an escape room is and the type of challenges that we present people is a bit of a learned skill. There's not a ton of people who were born absolute masters of the types of challenges that I like to throw at my players. It is very much, I kind of see what they're doing here. I'm going to kind of flex this muscle. Maybe, people who are really into puzzles generally, and oddly enough, musicians. This is a little bit studied why musicians are so good at puzzles and vice versa. I don't know if you know, the people that win the World Crossword Puzzle Tournament every year, everyone in the world comes together and does I think over half of those people are musicians. It's very uncanny how just that type of brain. Anyway, other than, musicians and people that do puzzles for a living, the second experience is second and beyond, because we often do repeat customers. It's really, really exciting because they have the right kind of confidence and they have the right kind of experience to really tackle the challenges as hard and as fast as they wanted to that first time. Now, we go out of our way to make sure that struggling through that first time is a wonderful experience. But and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. We have our experiences are tuned fairly difficultly because we want to make sure that everyone gets a full, nice, robust experience. And so to compensate, teams who are maybe not so experienced or it's their first time and they haven't learned these lessons, our experiences are mostly curated by our staff that are trained to kind of just that, curate the experience and make sure that everyone is engaged and everyone's buy-in. They're approaching these challenges in the right way. And so the second time, the third time, the fourth time, our staff are decreasingly involved as folks just kind of know how to operate as a team. They sort of know what to look for. They know how to think, and which is exactly what you want to see, because then they're working in teams outside of the game, conquering actual, factual, real life challenges in a way that, they won't always have my staff holding their hand.
That makes sense. Good. Now, I want to jump to your own team, and I'm curious to what extent you use the puzzles or the early versions of the puzzle, you test them out within your team when you went remote. Is that something that happened?
It is, yes, but not as much as frankly we should. This is one of, I wouldn't call it the biggest areas for opportunity of myself as a leader is our experiences. You can really only do them once. That's why we keep cranking them out. So we have a huge portfolio of these things. And a huge percentage of my staff are the folks that are curating these and running these games. And when they are hired, they need to play them immediately so that they are trained to be able to run them. So there's not a ton of meaningful ways that we can have our own teams use our own content, because they are the ones running the content. That said, there's any number of my kind of direct competitors or folks that do kind of similar things. And frankly, and this is not unique to us, of course, the past 2.5 years have been just every day is just figuring out a new approach to a new challenge that life has thrown at us. So to answer your question, we don't do this as much as we should. We need to walk the walk better than we historically have. It's just particularly hard because so many of our staff are the ones that run the games and we can't easily play our own stuff.
I imagine you have some competitors. I mean, something that you can probably easily do is do an exchange.
There's absolutely the fortunate for a business perspective and unfortunate for what we're talking about here. So many of the folks in our space, as it were, are a little bit more tuned to just fun and games. Like, this is just a fun thing to do, like a nice morale event on Friday afternoons. We really lean into the professional development and team building. We have half-day workshops where it's just these super fun games. And so there exist, of course, solutions that also do professional development and like really build the team stuff. But dare I say, none of those folks are half as fun as we are. And part of the virtues of like why we're able to make content as good as we are, as I mentioned, I come from a games and tech background. I was at Microsoft for the first half of my career. And while I was there, and we would go to just from one horrible team building activity to the next horrible team building activity, I was the person on the team that made everyone miserable. I had no buy-in to any of these things. And so it's really, really challenging for me to like really find a ton of value, both as an individual participant and as a leader of employees in team building activities that you just don't want to be there. So that's a big part of it, and it makes it a little bit challenging. That said, we can do better. We can always do better for sure.
Okay, so let's expand a little bit more on your own team. So you said you found out that remote works, and remote works for your customers. Now, what does it mean to have remote work for you, for your team?
So our business is weirder than most. And so we have, we have in-person traditional, insofar as we basically invented them over here, escape rooms in our Seattle headquarters. And the folks that, greet people at the door and get people to the lobby, there's no doing that remotely. So we have that line of businesses with mostly in person. And same thing for when we do portable team building and we go to corporate events. We're physically sending people there. But when folks are not actually running experiences for guests, so I'm talking about all my designers or all my operations folks, when they're not actually actively running stuff, it's just this. It's just we're over video chat. I was a huge remote fan before the pandemic happened. Then the pandemic happened, and when we were forced to do it, it was a very seamless thing for the most part, certainly for our virtual staff. We like to, as I say, we're a Washington State business. A lot of our employees are Washington State. We like to keep it local, but we have lots of staff that I've never seen in person, and they've worked for us for years. Just work on the other side of the country, and it works out well. And part of why I'm super duper comfortable with that is not just the nature of the work, but is I imagine you're maybe familiar. There's a professor at Harvard Business School. His name is Raj Chowdhury. Do you know? So for the listeners who do not know, this is my absolute favorite thing, because we like to be data driven whenever humanly possible. He did a remote work. I think he called it work from anywhere. This is back in 2012. He began this study, so it's very much recent enough to be relevant to the modern workplace. But at this point, the pandemic is 8 years away, and he did a great big prolonged study with the U.S. Patent Office, where they do measurable, quantifiable work. And I'll skip to the end. He found that broadly, working remotely increased your productivity by close to 5%. And I saw that and I thought, I knew it, of course. And so, whenever we kind of had to go remote as we're building the team, kind of having a great big office with going back to the old ways, never crossed my mind once.
Great. And what kind of team building exercises did you do internally for your own team when you went remote? So you're not working on your own, you're not doing Puzzle Break. What kind of team building do you do to help make sure?
Well, it's games. For me, it's games. It's just games, just because there's terms for this in every industry. Whether you're making widgets that somebody's going to use in the kitchen, or team building that somebody's going to make for anybody, that you have to design for kind of the least accessible, most difficult kind of person. And I'm that person. And so whenever it comes to team building, the thing what is worse than no team building at all is bad or unfun team building. So anything that's games. I love escape rooms in person. As I say, most of us are Washington based, and we're no longer in lockdown. So something that we're very interested in getting going more of are just doing in-person escape rooms with the team. There is no better team building in the world. Obviously, I am super biased, but it's just a super duper fun thing that tricks us as employees, just getting dogs their medicine inside of some delicious cheese. I love getting team building wrapped up in some awesome fun activity that at the end you had a great time, and just you wake up and you happen to have some amazing team building. So escape rooms are a big part of that. Other games as well. Things like laser tag, they're super duper fun. I don't think that there's a Raj Chowdhury report somewhere that analyzes the team building efficacy of laser tag. But when it's fun and it's legitimately fun and people want to be there, that's the best team building for me and for us.
Excellent. Is there anything else about team building that I haven't asked you that you would like to share about?
We danced around this, and I just kind of hit this at home, is generally speaking, something fun is better than something unfun that is sciencey. So there's any number of team building out there that's like, we got this system and with this color is your personality, and we get together and we do this activity that is deeply unfun. Or we have an activity that is, forget the science, forget the deliverables, forget the whatever, but you're going to work together as a team to conquer some objective, either mentally or physically or whatever. That's what I generally like. And anecdotally, at least, that's what works the best for everyone that we meet.
Excellent. And can you let folks know where they can go to learn more about Puzzle Break?
Of course. Our website is puzzlebreak.us. And all of our services there, ranging from our in-person escape rooms in Seattle for friends or coworkers, and our portable team building that we take to places. We didn't get too much into hybrid, but we also have, the hybrid team building. We'll come to your event and do, some people there, some people working remotely, all the way through virtual team building and our suite of games and workshops that are whole half-day things. All of that at puzzlebreak.us, and we hope you guys reach out.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nate. And thank you very much to our viewers and listeners for checking out the Wise Decision Maker Show.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Yeah. And please make sure to leave a review wherever you check this out, on Apple, iTunes, and Amazon, YouTube. Subscribe and make sure that you listen to the show, as I hope to see you on the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. But in the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.